There's no business like show business.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Following program is closed captioned for the thinking impaired.
All systems go.
Good morning.
Prepare to be astonished.
Listen in your office, in your car, or even your neighborhood bar. You can listen with your whole family.
Is this the morning show you were dreaming about? Go back to sleep.
I enjoy that type of radio.
It is a group of people brought together because they share a common belief in what government should be like.
We don't need your education. We don't need your thought control.
That's a talent.
He's wacky, he's zany, wacky and zany. It's another wacky and zany show.
Good morning, Armstrong County. I'm David Croyle. Welcome to David and Friends. I'm the David. You're the friend. 6 past the hour of 9 o'clock this morning. 31 degrees on the outside. And by the way, that's as warm as it's going to get today. We just kind of hold steady there for most of the afternoon. By the end of the afternoon, we're going to gradually go down to 15. Ooh, yeah, 15 tonight. So just get ready to throw another log on the fire. You're going to need it. On Friday, we talked a little bit about Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf and Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman, as they are basically taking this idea of recreational marijuana to all of the counties, all 67 counties. And they're saying, well, we want to hear from you, and I'm sure that they do. I'm not sure that their mind's already made up in legislature or not. But anyway, they say they want to hear from us. In fact, over 12,000 people have went online and filled out a survey form that the state has put up online. Not a bad number, 12,000. Yeah, pretty good considering, of course, how many Pennsylvanians there are. That's a lot more to go, but a lot of people didn't know it was up there. In fact, today, if you go to kittanningpaper.com, you're also going to see a survey we put up for Armstrong County to know a little bit about how you feel about legalizing recreational marijuana. So all you have to do is go to kittanningpaper.com. You'll see it on the right-hand side. Go ahead and click on it and vote. How do you feel about it? And that way we can kind of get a little pulse here today to find out how the local people feel. But I want to right now talk to somebody who is actually, I think, in an interesting position. He's Democrat, and so you think, well, all the Democrats, they just align with the Democrats. Well, yeah, but the one thing I like about this senator from Allegheny, Westmoreland County, is the fact that he tends to look at all sides. He tends to look at it a little bit broader than just saying, well, I'm Democrat, so I'm going to vote this way. In fact, he's asked some very hard questions in the past. He even was very careful in dealing with the medical marijuana vote. And you see, folks, here's the problem. Pennsylvania could probably generate over $500 million if they just legalize and tax marijuana. But I want him to tell us a little bit more about it. So I'm making welcome today Senator Jim Brewster. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning, David.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. And let's talk a little bit about this. As you look and you see this, tell me where you're at with this.
Well, my position has been that we should go out to the public. I mean, every now and again in government, we always ask folks to get out on Election Day and support us. And then after that, we kind of make decisions for them for what we think they want. But this is a significant event, and I think this is appropriate for a referendum on a ballot. I think the meetings that the Lieutenant Governor is having is admirable, but it's not going to give us a sampling that I think is noteworthy enough to do legislation. So I'm supporting a referendum. I'm going to try and do that through the General Assembly to get it on the ballot. It would be nice to have it on the presidential election where we can get the opinion of several million people. And then we have some idea on which direction we want to go here. And, it could very well end up being a very close vote. I don't know. I don't have any idea. I'm getting a lot of input from folks on both sides. But I really think if we get a larger sampling of what the voters are thinking, it'll give us better direction on what to do in Harrisburg.
I'll tell you, I'm going to kind of go a couple different ways here this morning, so just bear with me. But I think, first of all, if you have this on the ballot, you are probably going to end up having more young people that will register to vote than what you have had in a long time, because many of them say, well, government, what does that mean to me? And they kind of just are very lackadaisical about it. But the minute you put this on the ballot, they're going to come alive and they're going to want to vote. Do you think that's going to be the case?
Well, I think it will. I'm not sure that's a bad thing. I mean, I look at it, as you said, in a broader picture here. I mean, the young folks, this is their future. I mean, they need to play a bigger role in what we do in Harrisburg. But I will tell you this, I don't want to date myself, but I went to college in the late 60s, early 70s, and the marijuana discussion was just as spirited then as it is now. So when I look at the age of folks that are in favor of this, I'm a little surprised at times that they're a lot older than you might think. And I'm not giving an opinion, by the way. I want to hear what the people have to say. But I'm not so sure that we wouldn't see an older group interested in this as well, for different reasons. I mean, this is a complex issue, David. We have people incarcerated now. We're talking about, should we be arresting people for small amounts of marijuana, and should we be putting folks in jail for these kinds of... This gets very complicated, and I'm a pretty conservative guy, so I'm not advocating that we let everybody out of jail. I don't want to get that opinion, but whatever we do, there's going to be a significant financial impact to the state. There are still significant considerations for what this means from a health perspective for young children and teenagers. There's going to be a significant impact on what happens with our judicial system going forward. That's why I went on the ballot, because I want folks to understand this isn't just a yes or no thing. This will affect our society in general, the culture going forward, and so it's a big deal, and probably as bigger than the prohibition days. So, and we know what's happened with the legalization of alcohol.
Well, you're right. In fact, let's go that direction for just a moment, because I talked to the state police here in Kittanning at the barracks, and just recently, and they were telling me, they said on average they pick up at least a minimum of 2 people DUI or drug related in a day. So at least they're picking up 2 a day. Now that doesn't sound a whole lot, but for a county our size, that's to me that's a lot. And you end up, we have an alcoholic problem here. I mean, and I think it's pretty much nationwide, but there's also that problem where you have professional drunk individuals who are going to work and they basically are performing, and if they can, and they've been out drinking the night before, whatever. I mean, doesn't this also cause an issue with employers? Where are they afraid? Are they concerned that, okay, all of a sudden we legalize it and then immediately goes into abuse, and then we've got to pay to take care of the abuse?
Well, there's no question that that's one of my concerns as well. What kind of plans do we have in place to deal with those who get stopped for being under the influence of, if not alcohol, some sort of drug? And these are the things. There are many like this, but your example is a good one, and it gets more complicated than that, because if you look at some of the things that we see clinically, and you said this at the beginning of the show, I was one of the last ones to get on board with the medical cannabis, medical marijuana. But after talking to family after family and seeing the folks that would benefit from this kind of medication, I finally was convinced that it was the right thing to do. But to your point, though, there's a broader issue. I mean, regardless of what we do in the state of Pennsylvania, I think there might be 8 or 9 states now that have recreational marijuana legalized, but it is still illegal on a federal level. The medical cannabis is illegal on a federal level. So, we need to make sure whatever we do, we get our folks in Washington to march to the same beat. If we're going to legalize something, we need to make it legal. You can't, because on any given day, and I'm not going to speak for the president, but on any given day, the federal government can come in and start arresting people in states where they're using recreational marijuana. That's just a fact. And actually medical marijuana. So we need to get in step with the federal government as well. It's an all-cash business. It's dangerous right now because we're not giving those companies that are selling medical marijuana an opportunity to run their business to help people with pain management and that sort of thing. They can't take credit cards. They can't take checks. They have to take cash. So, we need to get that issue cleared up pretty quickly. The banks are not ready on a national level to deal with this because of the fear of the federal government. So it gets complicated on the money side. And I'm going to just throw this in, David. I know I'm digressing a little bit, but I want to be very clear. No matter which way this goes, if in fact a large percentage of Pennsylvanians want to do this, we need to be very clear how we're going to spend the money. And I'm going to advocate very strongly that the money be used for addiction, where there's way too many people to death because of drugs, and half the money should go towards mental health. I mean, we hear a lot about the mass shootings and mental health in general. I'm a firm believer that we need to look at some of these mass shootings that are going on with regard from a mental health perspective, and that doesn't mean everybody with a mental health issue is going to do those kinds of things. But we had testimony a couple of years ago from a professional who said, listen, we used to have 25 mental health institutions in Pennsylvania and 5 prisons. Now we have 25 prisons and 5 mental health. We're going the wrong direction. Okay, we're putting people in prison that probably need to be clinically monitored in a safe environment, of course. So that's where I want the money to go. I don't want this money to go into the general fund to be used for anything other than, if you're dealing with a narcotic of some sort. We already know this addiction problem is one of the worst things in the world, in our country in particular. And when you're losing 130 people a day across this country to some sort of drug-related illness, that's a problem. And when we have folks going into where they work and into schools and what have you, and doing harm to dozens of people, that is not normal behavior. And we need to deal with that.
I totally agree.
That's where I want the money to go to. I just wanted to throw that in.
I agree with you on that. Now, whether it really will end up going there, that's one thing, but that's a whole other discussion. But the point is, we're not talking about, in legalizing marijuana, we're not necessarily talking about drug overdoses. So the 130 people that we cite the day that die from drug overdoses, 41, was it last year or something like that in Armstrong County? So that's not the recreational marijuana. You're not overdosing on marijuana. But that brings out an interesting thing too that I've said 3 or 4 times, and now I'll bring out publicly. But I'm getting a little miffed or dismayed at the state in general, because it wasn't too long ago that I sat in seminar after seminar at one point where they were coming in, and we have a group here called Drugs Kill Dreams, and it's been done by District Magisterial Judge Gary DeComo, a great man, and it's a great program, and they have the jail experience and all this stuff, and it's very, very good. But in that program, as well as many others, they talk about marijuana being the, quote, gateway drug. Then we're saying, yeah, but look at the money we can generate from it. So is the state just being a prostitute? Are we just saying, okay, because we can make money at it, is that the reason to legalize it? I mean, after all this time we've talked about it being the gateway drug, all this time we've preached it to our kids, you don't want to do marijuana because of this. I mean, we're so hypocritical in this area? Well,
David, you're exactly spot on. I mean, I can't speak for every legislator, and I wouldn't do that. Certainly the revenue, I'm a little bit of a historian, so I go back to the Prohibition days. I mean, if you read the books that I read, they'll tell you that, alcohol became legal. It was a mind-altering product, but it became legal because the federal government couldn't enforce it, and Al Capone had 3,000 people working for him in Chicago. So it was easier just to take the revenue and not fight the product. Mm-hmm. That didn't make the product any safer. Mm-hmm. And I'm not suggesting that, for those of your listeners that may be drinkers, I'm not suggesting that we go backwards. What all I'm saying is there are still people that say alcohol and marijuana are gateway drugs. There are other people that contest that. And that's part of what I think we need to do before we do anything. I mean, meetings aside that the lieutenant governor may be having and putting it on the ballot, before we do that, I think there needs to be clear statistical data to decide because I think people are different. I think alcohol and marijuana could be a gateway drug for some folks. For others, it may not be. I really think we're that different. So how we get this information out to millions of people is really going to be our issue. And will some people vote on legislation because of the potential revenue? I don't doubt that could happen in some cases. I like to think that we got a pretty conscientious group in Harrisburg that would consider the health and well-being of people in general. But I mean, these are the kind of things we have to deal with the state police and see what the statistics are in some of the bigger counties like Allegheny County and in Philadelphia with regard to people that they're pulling over and citing. We just can't ignore that. So you bring up a good point. I don't know the answer to your question. It's a good one because will we be driven by the revenue or will we be driven by the fact that we think it's a harmless recreational product? I don't know. Yeah, I think the jury's still out.
When you want your kids to have morals and you want them to be basically go by their moral compass, but then we turn around and we confuse them with 1 minute we're saying, yeah, that bad news, you don't want to go there, and then all of a sudden we say, well, we're going to make some money on it, so let's go. Like I said, I'm really dismayed over the whole thing, but that's...
Well, you're making my case, David. That's why I want to put it on the ballot. I don't want to make that decision by myself. We make decisions every day. We write legislation and make laws every day. And some of them are just sort of routine, kind of easy to understand, common sense things. But oftentimes you run into one like this, which is very complicated, for just the reason you just said. Mm-hmm. For older folks who may vote for it, what are they going to tell their grandchildren? Do you really want your grandchildren? I don't know what the answer to that is. I know there's some that they didn't mind using it, but they don't want to see their grandchildren using it. Now, how they translate that into a vote on the ballot question, I don't know. But you've hit the nail on the head because it's a very complex issue, as we said at the start of the show. And I think people should give serious thought to what they're doing, because if the numbers come back overwhelmingly one way or another, if it's a no overwhelmingly, then I don't think you'll see a lot of legislation fly. But if the numbers come back, regardless of what mechanism we use, whether it be a referendum question, whether it be meetings, whether it just be general feedback from the constituents, if there's a large majority in favor of this, you're going to see legislation flying from every direction. So I don't want to do that and have 1 ounce of information or data that I think is relevant hidden from the public. And it's difficult to get information out to people. People tend to read what they want to read.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's no doubt about it.
If they're in favor of it, they're not going to read something that says don't do it.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, one more question, because Jack Bennett is here with me, and Jack's the man about town, and he knows all and sees all and does all.
Oh, yeah.
But he wanted to talk to you, so go ahead, Jack.
A couple of minutes ago, we were talking about people picked up in Armstrong County by the state police, and there was averaging something like 2 a day. How does that break out for drugs versus marijuana?
Well, I'm the one who brought up that statistic, but the one I'm talking about was primarily DUI, the 2 a day. But then that's the hard number that they gave me. Now, the question does come though. I mean, we know that there's a whole lot more out there that are being picked up on substance abuse. So I have to get those numbers specifically. But Senator, as we talk about this becomes the problem, because addiction, I don't go out gambling, because when I start I would just keep on going, so I don't do it. But I don't have an alcohol issue. I do have a coffee and a sugar issue. so,
nobody's perfect, David.
I know. So at what point do you just kind of like, I guess what I'm saying is, so there's some people out there that they would just maybe, smoke a joint and life is good and that would be it. But then there's others that can't go a day. Like we wake up and have to have our coffee in the morning. They'd have to smoke a joint. And how long does that last before they can go out and be, quote, sober again?
Well, David, that's another very good point. I mean, if you look at marijuana and look at drug testing, which many companies do, Again, I'm not a doctor, but I mean, marijuana stays in your system longer than I think even cocaine and heroin. I'm not sure, but I know it stays in your system a long time. Certainly not as harmful as the other illicit drugs would be. But again, just how do we deal with companies who do current drug testing? What do they do? And some companies, I've worked in the banking industry for a long time, and I know that when folks would have a substance abuse problem, whether it be alcohol or drugs, a lot of companies make available outreach programs for them. And will they continue that once it's legal, or would it then become the burden of the individual citizen? And that's why I said earlier, it's such a complex thing. There are so many moving parts that will have to change if it becomes legal. If it doesn't become legal, then it's a status quo. I'm not sure that's a good idea. Even if you don't legalize it, there are probably things that we should change. We're probably arresting people for some small amount in a glove compartment or something. And I'm a real conservative guy, but I'm starting to think that even law enforcement will tell you this is a waste of everybody's time. A fine, that kind of stuff. And that doesn't mean if you have a trunk load of weed, in your car, that you don't have to pay a price for that. But there's just so many things are going to have to change. Other laws will have to change. Is my point. So I would recommend that people stay focused on the clinical side, stay focused on the things that you think may have an adverse effect on your family or your neighbors, and if you can find enough good in because we say it's recreational, then I guess you got to vote the way you want to vote.
Yeah.
But to think that this could be legalized without some pushback in some areas would be a little bit naive.
Yeah.
But I'm not saying, again, I'm not advocating to go one way or another. I want to know the honest opinion of people. My opinion is irrelevant unless there's a tie.
Senator Jim Brewster, Democrat, Allegheny, Westmoreland County, thank you so much for joining us. It's 9:27.
Here's an excerpt from The Selfish Path to Romance by Dr. Ellen Kenner.
Suppose you've caught your wife in so many lies and she's broken so many promises that you can't believe anything she says. Or you discover your husband is cheating on you, spending money on things you had agreed to decide on jointly, and only pretending to look for a job. What does dishonesty do to romantic love? It kills it. What do flaws like this in your partner do to your sense of feeling visible, valued, and cherished? Can you trust or feel emotionally close to your dishonest partner? Could you desire intimacy with a person with a bad moral character? You might be thinking, but I have a friend whose husband is a cheat and she loves him anyway. Is this love or dependency? Perhaps fear keeps her in the marriage. I'm afraid to be alone or on my own. Or self-contempt. He's all I deserve. Whatever it is not a happy, intimate, romantic relationship.
You can download Chapter 1 for free at drkenner.com, and you can buy the book at amazon.com.